Hey, noble ones, welcome to the channel. It's me, again. This is my last react video to the episode of Lex Fridman podcast about Graham Hancock, Lost Civilization of the Ice Age in Ancient Human History. I've already made a bunch of videos. You'll find lots of links in the description, I suppose. But we've already mostly reacted and provided commentary and discussed, I want to say, all the main sections of this video. But today, I want to see how he responds to his critics. It's kind of a chunky section, if you will, so I think a dedicated video should suffice. For context, when it comes to this entire discussion, sometimes I've agreed with him, other times I completely disagreed with some of his points. So I'm not a hater, I'm not a believer or a massive fan. I'm kind of in between, if you will. Let's check it out. I'm really curious to see how he faces intellectual challenge.
So to me, the story that we've been talking about, it is both exciting if the mainstream archaeology narrative is correct and the one you're constructing is correct. Both are super interesting because the mainstream archaeology perspective means that there's something about the human mind from which the pyramids, these ideas spring naturally. You place humans anywhere, you place them on Mars, it's going to come out that way. So that's an interesting story of human psychology that then becomes even more interesting when you evolve out of Africa with Homo sapiens, how they think about the world. That's super interesting. And then if there's an ancient civilization, advanced civilization that explains why there's so many similar types of ideas that spread, that means that there's so much undiscovered still about the sort of the spring of these ideas of civilization that come.
I agree with Lex. It is fascinating regardless of how you look at this.
So to me, they're both fascinating. So I don't know why there's so much sort of infighting, but
I think it's partly territorial. I think that I cannot speak of all archaeologists, but some archaeologists feel very territorial about their profession, and they do not feel happy about outsiders entering their realm, especially if those outsiders have a large platform. And that's, I've found that the attacks on me by archaeologists have increased step by step with the increase of my exposure. I wasn't very interesting to them when I just had one minor bestseller in 1992 with a book called The Sign and the Seal. But when Fingerprints of the Gods was published in 1995 and became a global bestseller, then I started to attract their attention and appear to have been regarded as a threat to them, and that is the case today.
That's the part that I'm interested to see, because again, I'm kind of new to this whole Graham Hancock situation and his theories and hypotheses. What I find interesting now is when he says they attacked him, does he mean ad personam or does he mean that they were attacking his arguments? Because if they're attacking his arguments, I imagine that it might depend archaeology by archaeologist. If archaeologists attack his arguments, that's absolutely fine. At the end of the day, with your hypotheses, you are attacking their arguments. So anyone who attacks his arguments but doesn't attack the person, I wouldn't even consider to be anything but the natural systematic basis or prism of intellectual discourse. But of course, if people attack him directly, then that might be a different scenario, clearly.
That is why Ancient Apocalypse Season 1 was defined as the most dangerous show on Netflix. It's why the Society for American Archaeology wrote an open letter to Netflix asking Netflix to reclassify the series as science fiction. It's why they accused the series
I mean, Netflix, if Netflix were to do that, they would have to reclassify as science fiction and fantasy. In fact, so many shows that they have published and endorsed, I don't think they're going to do that. Although then again, I haven't watched it. So now I'm speaking, maybe if I watch it, I will think, no, this is sci-fi. I don't know. So at that point, perhaps I'll have to make more episodes. But as of now, I'm speaking at face value.
Anti-Semitism, misogyny, white supremacism, and a whole bunch of other things like that. It have nothing to do with anything that's in the series. It was like, we must shut this down. This is so dangerous to us. It's certainly not a danger. There are many more dangerous things in the world than a television series.
Yeah, okay, I do sympathize with that because, of course, people accuse me of white supremacy anytime I challenge anything that has been pushed, even if it has no intellectual or documented basis. So I do sympathize with that. White supremacy, bigot, and woke are terms that have been misused so much these days that I honestly just roll my eyes whenever I hear them. And yes, there are people that are absolutely racist, white supremacists, actual bigots, actual crazy activists that you would define as woke, I imagine. But everyone is being called woke these days, including me. Everyone is being called a racist. So now, whenever I hear these words, that's why I don't use them anymore. I don't use any of these because to me, they've been overused. Now, everything. This pistachio, it's a bigot. And this controller is clearly woke. Green supremacist.
Going on right now, but maybe it was seen as a danger to archaeology, that this non-archaeologist was in archaeological terrain and being viewed and seen by large and read by large numbers of people. Maybe that was part of the problem. And human nature being what it is, I noticed that two of my principal critics, John Hoops from the University of Kansas and Flint Dibble, who's now teaching at the University of Cardiff in Wales in the UK, are both people who like to have media exposure. And John Hoops has just recently started a YouTube channel. Flint Dibble has had one for quite a while, pretty small number of followers. I think that they feel that they should be the ones who are getting the global attention, and that it's not right that I am, and that the best way to stop that is to stop me, to shut me down, to get me cancelled, and basically requiring Netflix to relabel my series from a documentary to a science fiction.
Well, here's the thing. Here's how I'm going to discuss that. Let's imagine for a second that I watch his entire show. And I think that it's complete nonsense, okay? I don't think I would. I think I would probably have more of a balanced approach when I'm like, no, this, I think is nonsense. And then another thing, yeah, I think he might have a point there. That's usually how, because I don't act out of emotions when it comes to this. I act with critical thinking. Therefore, I try to be cold and just look at the facts and not let personal opinions. I don't have a personal opinion. I think he has a cool voice, to be honest. And I think when he speaks, he's an excellent speaker. That's all I know as far as I'm concerned now. So I don't have any horse in the race, if you will. And I have disagreed with some of his opinions on the pyramids, but also some other ideas that he presented. They were excellent when it comes to being thought-provoking. At the end of the day, let's imagine, though, that I watch his show and I think it's 99% nonsense. I still wouldn't silence him. If you have the ability, you're deep into this, and you have the ability to debunk 60% of what he says, debunk it. Speech is fought with more speech. So, if I think his theories are nonsense and he's just trying to do it for monetary gain, then if I have the evidence, I'll debunk it and I'll make my own show. That's how a functioning society works. Because if you remember the Cleopatra documentary on Netflix, I absolutely debunked it, but I wouldn't try to cancel it. I strongly disagree with how it represents stuff that is clearly wrong, and they have the full label documentary on it. So what do? I make a response video, I present the evidence with the help of my team, we translate the original sources, we put everything there for people to see and listen to our positions, but I don't want them to remove it. Why would I do that? Canceling, silencing is not the right thing to do. And if anything, it makes your points look weak. Because if your points are strong and the evidence is on your side, debunk away. That's the same thing that I tell the people that tend to attack me and try to attack me ad hominem. I'm like, okay, attack my points. Oh, you can't? Well, what does that tell you then? So yeah, I'm very open-minded. Whatever he wants to say, I'll listen.
What they actually had the temerity to suggest to Netflix, that would, if that had gone through, if Netflix had listened to them, that would have effectively been the cancellation of my documentary series. It would no longer have been ranked under documentary. So it was a deliberate attempt to shut me down, and I see that going on again and again, and it's so unfortunate and so unnecessary. I've become very defensive towards archaeology. I hit back. After 30 years of these attacks on my work, I'm tired of it, and I do defend myself, and sometimes I'm perhaps over vigorous in that defense. Maybe I was...
As he should.
a little bit too strong in my critique of archaeology in the first season of Ancient Apocalypse. Maybe I should have been a bit gentler and a bit kinder. And I've tried to reflect that in the second season and to bring also many more indigenous voices into the second season, as well as the voices of many more archaeologists.
Yeah, in general, I got
Appreciate-
a chance to get a glimpse of the archaeology community, and in archaeology, in science in general, I don't have much patience for this kind of arrogance or snark or dismissal of general human curiosity that I think your work inspires in people. And so,
Yeah, that's why I like Lex, because Lex seems to be, we actually share this, he seems to be very much of an independent thinker, very middle ground, very open-minded, not entrenched. And I think this is an important aspect. He has guests from all sides of the political spectrum, from all areas of history, science, aliens. I think he's got a couple of those. I might be wrong, so double check once again. I didn't watch every single one of his podcasts, but he definitely has had people that was a little bit of a risk for him to have them in the podcast. And I appreciate that, because at the end of the day, I think people should be allowed to present their ideas. It doesn't mean that he agrees with them 100%. I mean, I doubt that he agrees with literally every single guest. He's just polite, and he lets the guest speak. And at the end of the day, doesn't treat the audience as a bunch of idiots who need to be told, this guy bad, this guy good, and that sort of stuff. No, he lets people speak, and then you can seek material and make your own mind. Use critical thinking.
that's why people like Ed Barnhart, who I recently had a conversation with, he radiates sort of kindness and curiosity as well. And it's like that kind of approach to ideas, especially about human history, it inspires people.
Exactly.
It inspires millions of people to ask questions.
Exactly.
I mean, that's why you had Keanu Reeves on the new season. He's basically coming to the show from that same perspective of curiosity.
Keanu is genuinely curious about the past and very, very interested in it, and he's bringing to it questions that everybody brings to the past. He's speaking for every man in the series.
So given that, can you maybe steelman the case that archaeologists make about this period that we've been talking about? Can you make the case that is indeed what happened, is it was hunter-gatherers for a long time, and then there was a cataclysm, a very difficult period in human history with the Younger Dryas, and that changed the environment and then led to the springing up of civilizations at different places on Earth. Can you sort of make the case for that?
No, I completely understand why that is the position of archaeology, because that's what they've found. Archaeology is very much wishing to define itself as a science, and it uses the techniques of weighing and measuring and counting are very key to what archaeology does. And in what they've found and what they've studied around the world, they don't see any traces of a lost civilization. And the idea that besides, we live in a very politically correct world today, and the idea that some kind of lost civilization brought knowledge to other cultures around the world is seen as almost racist or colonialist in some.
I'm such a fanboy. I love Keanu Reeves. He's like my favorite actor. He has been my favorite actor since I was 18. So this is a massive. Now I want to watch the show, to be honest. I'll watch it. I'll watch it because I absolutely adore Keanu Reeves. He's such a good man, good actor. So cool. He really became my favorite actor with Matrix, of course, but even before that, Johnny Mnemonic. Johnny Mnemonic. See, and this is also a good response, I think, to those people that utilize scare tactics or manipulation tactics, such as guilty by association. So imagine that I am someone who thinks that Graham Hancock's theories are all wrong. Imagine that I watched the whole documentary and I'm like, no, this is complete nonsense. That doesn't mean that now I think, but does Keanu Reeves then agree with everything just because he took part? No, it's just, to me, it just shows that Keanu Reeves is an open-minded person who wants to join in an open discussion. That's all that tells me.
besides, we live in a very politically correct world today, and the idea that some kind of lost civilization brought knowledge to other cultures around the world is seen as almost racist or colonialist in some.
Of course, that's absolutely irrelevant to me. Once again, facts, not feelings.
In some way, it triggers that aspect as well. But basically, I think majority of archaeologists are in complete good faith on this. I don't think that anybody's really seeking to frame me. I think that what we're hearing from most archaeologists, some much more vicious than others, but what we're hearing from most archaeologists is this is what we found, and we don't see evidence for a lost civilization in it. And to that, I must reply, please look at the myths. Please consider the implications of the Younger Dryas. Please look at the ancient astronomy. Please look at those ancient maps and don't just dismiss them and sneer at them. And for God's sake, please look more deeply at the parts of the world that were immensely habitable and attractive during the Ice Age and that have hardly been studied by archaeology at all, before you tell us that your theory is the only one that can possibly be correct.
So in other words, it's kind of an invitation. I do understand his point of view here. I think it does make logical sense. It's basically an invitation to make this inquiry multidisciplinary in nature. So the idea is, of course, archaeology is a wonderful science, and I actually appreciate that he is kind of giving credit even to his opponents. That's something I appreciate. And but it is, of course, consider it a science, like he's saying, then it's looking at the material goods, the material evidence. But then if you combine it with mythology, so ancient literature, with astronomy, with physics, then that's when you can create and build a more complete picture. Once again, whether he be right or wrong, the concept, if I understood him correctly, is absolutely legitimate.
In fact, it's a very arrogant and silly position of archaeology, because archaeological theories are always being overthrown. It can take years, it can take decades. It took decades in the case of the Clovis First hypothesis for the settlement of the Americas. But sooner or later, a bad idea will be kicked out by a preponderance of evidence that that idea does not explain.
Yeah, I mean, that is correct. That's why there is a massive difference between the politically driven historical rewriting of history, when it's based on propaganda. So you start from a conclusion and selectively focus on the evidence that sort of strengthens or reinforces the conclusion that you already decided with your selective bias, or because of an agenda, from the rewriting of history that is instead the nature or the basis of academia, which is always structured within a framework imbued in documented evidence. So we do constantly rewrite history. It's just you have to do it for the real reasons, which is first look at the evidence and then drive your conclusions.
If we can just look back at your debate with Flint Dibble on Joe Rogan Experience, what are some takeaways from that?
I have to watch that.
What have you learned? Maybe what are some things you like about Flint? You said that he's one of your big critics, but what do you like about his ideas, and what were you maybe bothered by?
First of all, just very recently, and it can be found on my YouTube channel and it's signaled on my website, I have made a video, runs about an hour, which looks at a series of statements that Flint made during the debate, which I was not prepared to answer. And it turns out that some of those statements are not correct. The notion, for example, that there were 3 million shipwrecks that have been mapped. Flint actually uses the word mapped, 3 million shipwrecks that have been mapped at one point in the debate, and I've put that clip into the video that I've brought out. That is not a fact. That is an estimate, a UNESCO estimate. And actually in the small print on one of the slides that he has on the screen, you can see the word estimate, but he never expresses that word out loud. So those who are listening to the podcast rather than watching it wouldn't even have a chance to see that. And I, sitting there in the studio, didn't see that word estimate either. And I didn't know that. I thought, my God, Flint has a point here. If there have been 3 million shipwrecks found and mapped, if that's the case, the absence of any shipwreck from a lost civilization of the Ice Age is a problem. But then I discovered that it isn't 3 million shipwrecks that have been mapped. It's much, much less than that. And maybe it's 250,000. Still a large number, but most of them from the last 1,000 years. Unfortunately, what Flint didn't go into, and perhaps he should have shared with the audience, and again I go into this in the video, is that there is indisputable evidence that human beings were seafarers as much as 50 or 60,000 years ago. The peopling of Australia involved a relatively short 90 kilometers, 100-kilometer ocean voyage, but nevertheless it was an ocean voyage, and it must have involved a large enough number of people to create a permanent population that wouldn't go extinct. The settlement of Cyprus
In a few generations, yeah.
is the same thing. It was always an island, even during the Ice Age. No ships have survived that speak to the settlement of Australia, and no ships have survived that speak to the settlement of Cyprus either. But
Yeah, perishable materials, so it is to be expected.
that doesn't mean that thing didn't happen.
I should just like linger on this, because for me it was, the shipwrecks thing was convincing, and then looking back, first of all watching your video, but also just realizing the peopling of Australia part. That's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
50,000 years
Yeah.
ago. Just imagine being the person standing on the shore, looking out into the ocean, standing on the shore of a harsh environment, looking out to the ocean of an even harsher environment, and deciding that, you know what, I'm going to go towards near certain death. And
I don't know
explore.
what's on the other
The
side.
unknown,
Of
the
You
unknown,
can't see
yeah.
90 kilometers.
Humans did it.
Yeah.
Man, I
And
love
again, it's
humans
that
so much.
it's that urge to explore.
Yeah.
And I suggest that it probably began with a few pioneers who made the journey there and back. They ventured into the water. They definitely had boats. And lo and behold, after a 2 or 3 day voyage, they ended up on a coastline.
Yeah, it could be like that sort of exploration, drive for exploration that even ancient humans had. Of course, it could be situational and anecdotal. So sometimes it could be driven by the urge to explore and the desire and curiosity. But other times could be pushed by desperation. So you were living under conditions that you're like, you know what, I've got nothing left, so I'm just going to try that. And other times it could be done because rulers or even tribe leaders wanted to risk men to try and gain a profit from it. So there are lots of contexts in which this could have happened. But definitely the most poetic, which is absolutely probable as well, would be the drive to figure out the unknown when it comes to this sort of exploration. But it is fascinating to try put ourselves in their shoes.
You're an individual. You've got by relatively straightforward island hopping with where each island is within sight of each other as far as Timor. And when you get to Timor, suddenly you can't island hop anymore. There's an expansive ocean that you can't see across. But that urge to explore, that curiosity that is central to the human condition, would undoubtedly have led some adventurous individuals to want to find out more and even be willing to risk their lives. And that first reconnoitering of what lay beyond that strait would have undoubtedly been undertaken by very few individuals, not enough to create a permanent population in Australia. But when they came back with the good news that there's a whole land there, that's the land that was in it that geographers call Sahul, which just as Sunda was the Ice Age Indonesian and Malaysian peninsula all joined together into one landmass. So Sahul was New Guinea joined to Australia. So they would have made landfall in New Guinea. And then they think, well, here is this vast, open, incredible land. We need to bring more people here. And that would have involved larger craft.
Yeah, something like that would have been similar, even though a lot more recent when it comes to Greenland and how Norse populations reached it. But this is a thought that I think could be really mind-blowing at this point. The expanse of the unknown that mankind faced possibly 50,000 years ago when they looked outside in the ocean and they knew nothing and they tried to venture and then they found new place in the start because they had the technology finally to create seaworthy vessels that could take them to the other side, and then they risked it and they populated and colonized. That expanse of the sea is what today is the cosmos for our civilization. We reached the moon and now we are getting ready to have the vessels, technology and economic backbone to reach Mars and possibly populate it within our lifetimes. These are those islands that the first humans who managed to figure out a way to traverse the endless seas were. And it's fascinating to think that perhaps humans in the future, in say 50,000 years from now, will look back at this moment in time that you and I are living together, as they are now part of an intergalactic civilization of humans within our galaxy, of world after world after world of colonized human expansion. Then they look back at our moment and say that was the moment when humans were courageous and brave enough and reached a sort of technological event horizon to venture into the, at the time, unknown that was the cosmos. I think that is fascinating when you think about it that way.
You need to bring people with resources, and you need to bring enough of them, both men and women, in order to produce a population that will not rapidly become extinct. And it's the same in Cyprus. There, the detailed work that's been done suggests very strongly that we're looking at planned migrations of groups of people in excess of 1,000 at a time, bringing animals with them. And this certainly would have involved multiple boats, and boats of a significant size.
And there's no archaeological evidence of those boats?
None whatsoever. The oldest boat that's ever been found in the world is the Dokos shipwreck off Greece, which is around 5,000 years old, if I recall correctly.
That's correct.
Everything that makes a boat is lost to time.
Yes, boats can be preserved under certain circumstances. There's a wreck at the bottom of the Black Sea, almost 2 miles deep. I didn't know the Black Sea was that deep, but there's a wreck, and there's no oxygen down there. That is more than 2,000 years old and is still in pretty much perfect condition.
Absolutely. Anaerobic conditions usually tell to help preservation of organic materials under the sea.
But in other conditions, the structure of the ship evaporates. Sometimes what you're left with is the cargo of the ship, and you could say there was a ship that sank here, but the ship itself has gone. The fact is, we know that our ancestors were seafarers as much as 50,000 years ago, and no ship has survived to testify to that, yet we accept that they were.
Do you think one day we'll find a ship that's
good point.
10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years old?
It's not impossible. I think it's quite unlikely, given the very thin survival of ships the further back you go in time, with the oldest, as I say, being about 6,000 years old now. And then the other thing to take into account is the Younger Dryas event itself, and the cataclysmic circumstances of that event, and the roiling of the seas that would have taken place then. How much would have survived in a boat accident at that time would have survived for thousands of years afterwards? I'm not sure, but I don't give up hope. It's possible.
Maybe in a glacier?
So that's back to the 3 million shipwrecks.
Yeah.
So what's your takeaway from that debate?
Well, my takeaway from that debate is that I should have been better prepared, and I should have been less angry. I have to say that Flint had really disturbed me with these constant, snide, not quite exact references to racism and white supremacism in my work. I detest such things.
Me too.
And to have those labels stuck on me. He's always avoided taking direct responsibility, pretty much always avoided. There's one example that I include in the video I've made where he really hasn't successfully avoided it. But in most cases, he's trying to say that I rely on sources that were racist, but that he's not saying that I myself am a racist. But the end result of those statements is that people all around the world came to the conclusion that Graham Hancock is a racist.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense, really. I mean, I'll have to watch, because now I'm just watching, of course, his perspective. But I think the next episode should be me reviewing that Joe Rogan episode. If that's something you're interested, let me know, and I will produce it very soon. Maybe give me a few uploads, and then I'll like 4 or 5 days of uploads, and then I will tackle it. But it's if what he's saying is correct, and it's exactly how it happened, then I want to say this: it's absolutely possible to separate the information or data recovered from, say, for example, a racist scientist, depending, if it's 800. If it's like the early 19th century archaeology. I mean, there is quite a lot of stuff that's based on racism and quite a lot of pseudoscience as well. But even when it's not pseudoscience and information is correct, you can still detach it from the person who said it. So you can condemn the racism. You can say this was done for the wrong reason and being racist is wrong. Okay, great. We can all agree. But is the data correct? And if the data is correct, the data is correct. The data isn't racist. The individual who discovered the data maybe. This is important distinction. And so just simply saying, well, yeah, but you're using this something that was made by a racist. Okay, well, he's a racist, he's a piece of shit. Great. Okay, that was a racist and he was a piece of garbage. But regardless, what about the data? If the data isn't garbage, then that's what I'm interested in. And the idea of, oh no, I can't say it because they might connect me. I connect you all you want. So I am with him when it comes to that statement and that idea. That is the correct approach. You should resent people that attack the validity of an argument based on the nature of that argument or the origin of the argument. We can bring them up for context, but if the data is correct, the data is correct.
And a white supremacist. And that really got under my skin, and it really upset me. And I felt angry about it. And I felt that I was there to defend Ancient Apocalypse Season 1, whereas in fact what I was there to do was to listen to a series of lectures where an archaeologist tells me what archaeologists have found, and that somehow I'm to deduce that from what they have found, they're not going to find anything else. At least not anything to do with the lost civilization.
Listen, I feel you. I've seen the intensity of the attacks, and the whole racism label is the one that can get under your skin. And it's a toolbox that's been prevalent over the past, let's say, decade, maybe a little bit more, as a method of cancellation. Yeah. When a person is the opposite of racist very often. It's kind of hilarious to watch.
Yeah.
It can get under your skin, especially when you have certain dynamics that happen on the internet where it seeps into a Wikipedia page, and then other people read that Wikipedia page, and you get to hear it from like friends. Oh, I didn't know you're whatever. And you realize that Wikipedia description of who you are actually has a lot of power, not by people that know you well, but by people that just kind of are learning about you for the first time.
Definitely.
And they can really start to annoy you and get under your skin.
Totally.
Yeah, you know what? I used to get annoyed. It used to annoy me so much when people would call me racist, homophobic, transphobic, bigot, woke. It used to annoy me a lot. Now I laugh at it. I really learned to laugh. So when I read it, either I use it to make content, laugh and make money, or I just laugh. Like literally sometimes even in the comments, most of the times I ignore them, but when I don't, I just laugh. I'm like, ha ha ha, you made my day. Because honestly, that is empowering. That is empowering. Because if you get pissed because of the unjust nature of it, that's what makes you pissed. It's the righteous, there is a word for it, you'll tell me in the comments. But anyways, you get pissed because it's unjust. And that's absolutely valid. But then you're letting them getting under your skin. And in a way, even if they fail at depicting you in the wrong way, because people who are intelligent will be able to see and be like, no, this guy's no racist. Even if he fails at that, he still succeeded in making sort of toxicity and kind of ruining your day. So I stopped allowing that, and now I just laugh. And it's great. When you start laughing at it and making fun of it, that's why I consider myself an alt-woke. I'm an alt-woke, far-right left-winger. Because that way, you know, you strip all the power from you, and that's when you're in control. And it works. Oh, it works. My wife sometimes sees me laugh. And like, why are you laughing? I'm like, oh, just a Neanderthal. And he's like, oh, one of those. Yeah.
People are kind of indirectly injecting, they're writing articles about you that can then be cited by Wikipedia. It can really bother a person who is actually trying to do good science or just trying to inspire people with different ideas.
I felt that my work was being deliberately misrepresented, and I felt that I, as a human being, was being insulted and wronged in ways that are deeply hurtful.
Absolutely. I do think that is wrong, regardless or whether he's correct or not with his hypotheses. That sort of vicious attacks and cancellation attempts, no, I don't stand by that.
My wife and I have 6 children between us, and we have 9 grandchildren. And of those 9 grandchildren, 7 are of mixed race.
There we go.
And this is my family. And these are kids who are going to grow up and read Wikipedia and learn from reading Wikipedia that grandpa was some kind of racist.
No, that's wrong. And you know what the people are going to do? The ones that attack him, they're going to say, oh, look, he's saying he's got a black friend, you know, when they do that. So you can't say anything, literally. Like if you do have friends and family that are mixed race, then but you can't say it, because if you say it, then oh, that black friend, black, okay. But if you don't say it, then you're like, you see, white supremacists only hangs out with white people, and so like it's a lose-lose with these, which is why I'm like, yes, say it, just say whatever the heck. What's even like, you have a friend, right? You have a friend and who is black, you have a friend who is gay, you have a friend who is straight, you have a friend who is white. Defining them as friends first, I think, is the best way to do it. And then add the details of their ethnicity, sexual aspects, orientation, and all that. It's one thing, but defining them by it. A gay friend, a black friend, a white friend, or as they call it, a white token, the anti-white racists say. You know, that's when I'm like, okay, maybe what are you trying to do here? So I think that's a good way to avoid it intellectually. And then the second thing is, it's so funny because even if he said this now, you know what I read on Twitter? It was hilarious. Some of these people that call everyone racist, and you were like, hey, this person you're calling a racist, yes, he's white, but his wife is black. You know what they said? Oh, it's a slavery fetish. That to me is racism. When the first thing that you attach to a black woman is slavery. Seriously. And you are the one calling other people racist? No, you are the racist. Because no, what I see there is a husband and a wife. They're loving each other, full stop. This is how sickening it gets. And that's why I will never be part of those types of people. Never. But now I laugh.
You know, this is a personal issue for me, and I'm afraid
Yeah.
I carried that personal anger into the debate, and it made me less effective than I should have been. But ultimately, I do want to pay tribute to Flint. He is an excellent debater. He's got a very sharp mind. He's a very clever man, and he's very fast on his feet. And I recognize that. I was definitely up against a superior debater in that debate. I'm not sure that I have those debating skills, and I certainly didn't have them on that particular day. I also admire about Flint something else, which is that he was willing to be there. Most archaeologists don't want to talk to me at all. They want to insult me from the sidelines. They want to make sure that Wikipedia keeps on calling me a pseudo-archaeologist or a purveyor of pseudo-archaeological theories. They want to make sure that the hints of racism are there, but they actually don't want to sit down and confront me. At least Flint was willing to do that, and I'm grateful to him for that. And I think in that sense it is an important encounter between people with, let's say, an alternative view of history and those with the very much mainstream view of history that archaeology gives us. And he's also a very determined character. He doesn't give up. So all of those things about him I admire and respect. But I think he fought dirty during the debate, and I've said exactly why.
Well, I think every debater fights dirty. So maybe this is also why you may have been unprepared, Mr. Hancock. At the end of the day, a debate is a phenomenal, when it's done correctly at high levels, is a phenomenal way to see wit, skill, and the ability to think quick on their feet, as he said. And some of the debaters can be extremely skilled. The only thing, though, is that whoever wins the debate is just the most skilled debater. The debate is not a great way to reach the truth. Also because oftentimes debaters don't have time to double check the information, check the sources, translate this, check that. They don't. So it's all really a matter of, that's why I say they always fight dirty. They always try to use red herrings and techniques that are just there to overcome and establish dominance within the debate. And that's why it is a skill that needs to be learned. And debates can be very entertaining, but they're not a great way to find the truth. And the only thing that you do is to see, oh, wow, which of these two debaters is the most skilled. That's why I really enjoy watching even political debates, not just about history, archaeology. But like, for example, I watched those debates between Ben Shapiro and Destiny, or those debates between like Andrew Wilson and whoever the heck it was. So I enjoy watching the debates, but I don't watch them because I want to learn the truth. I watch them because I'm just eating popcorn while I do.
In this video that I now have up on YouTube.
To say a positive thing that I enjoyed, I think towards the end, in him speaking about agriculture was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So the techniques of archaeology are pretty interesting, like where you can get some insights through the fog of time about like what people were doing,
Yeah.
how they were living. That's pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
It's
Yeah.
very interesting. It's a very important discipline. And I've said many times before publicly, I couldn't do any of my work without the work that archaeologists do. I emphasize very strongly in this video that I don't study what archaeologists study, but nevertheless, the data that archaeologists have generated over the last century or so has been incredibly valuable to me in the work that I do. But when I look at the Great Sphinx and the studies of archaeology saying that this is the work of the pharaoh Khafre, despite the absence of any single contemporary inscription that ascribes it to Khafre, and in fact the presence of other inscriptions that say that it was already there in the time of Khufu, I am not looking at what Egyptologists study. They just dismiss all of that and lock into the Khafre connection. At Göbekli Tepe, I'm not really looking at what archaeologists look at. I'm looking at the alignments of the megaliths and how they seem to track precession of the star Sirius over a period of time. Archaeologists aren't interested in any of that. So I value and respect archaeology. I think it's an incredible tool for investigating our past. But I wish archaeologists would bring a slightly gentler frame of mind to it and a slightly opener perspective. And also that archaeologists would be willing to trust the general public to make up their own minds. It's as though certain archaeologists are afraid of the public being presented with an alternative point of view, which they regard as quote-unquote dangerous, because they somehow underestimate the intelligence of the general public and think
I actually agree with him on this one. It is a form of gatekeeping, if you will.
the general public are just going to accept that. Actually, by condemning those alternative point of view, archaeologists make it much more likely that
True.
the general public will accept those alternative point of view, because there is a great distrust of experts in our society today.
And there should be.
Behaving in a snobbish, arrogant way, we archaeologists are the only people who are really qualified to speak about the past, and anybody else who speaks about the past is dangerous. That actually is not helpful to archaeology in the long term. There could be a much more positive and a much more cooperative relationship, and I can see that relationship with a gentleman like Ed Barnhart. It was very much the case with archaeologist Martti Paasinen from the University of Helsinki, and with geographer Alceo Ranzi, Brazilian geographer, very, very senior figure, who I worked with in the Amazon for season 2 of Ancient Apocalypse, looking at these astonishing earthworks that have emerged from the Amazon jungle, and which more and more are now being found with LiDAR. Indeed, we found some of them ourselves with LiDAR while we were there.
Yeah, that was an incredible part of the show that I got a chance to preview. It's like there's all this earthworks. Yeah, the traces of things built on the ground.
Okay, so this kind of is the end of his response to critics. I have to say, very well worded. I was positive positions and opinions, at least when it comes to his character, which is good. You know, you always want to kind of study the person and then study the positions as well. And I appreciated that. And also it pointed me towards that interview between Joe Rogan at Joe Rogan Experience. I, of course, watch a lot of Joe Rogan myself, find it very, very entertaining. And so he has got great guests. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to call it a day for today. And I will possibly resume this topic soon on this channel, so absolutely stay subscribed. If you haven't become a noble one, subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Thank you, Lex Fridman, and thank you, Mr. Hancock. And thank you. Bye.